Good morning and good evening for some of you, depending on where you are, and good afternoon for those joining from different parts of the world. Welcome to our roundtable here at Reframing Museums. I'm Mina Al-Arabi. I'm editor of the national newspaper based here in Abu Dhabi, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this exciting session over the next 75 minutes. We are here to discuss a number of matters, primarily how museums are being reframed and what some of the leading voices in both the museum and culture worlds are thinking about the future of museums. The title, From Acquisition to Storytelling, what does the future hold for museum collections? Of course, this year has been exceptional in many ways because of COVID-19 and how we gather together, as here we are from different parts of the world sitting on this session and conversation, but also how we gather together, how public spaces are used and how public discourse is being formed. In some ways, 2020 is also exceptional because it marks an important anniversary for New York University and Abu Dhabi, 10-year anniversary, who are jointly hosting us with Louvre Abu Dhabi that's just celebrated its 3-year anniversary. So with this, I would like to remind you that you may ask questions in the question panel on your screen. So please do send in your questions and I will endeavor to take as many of them as we can. We have an exceptional panel today that I will briefly introduce. Of course, all of their biographies are filled with incredible achievements and really research into various parts of the culture and museum scenes. First, I would like to introduce Professor Mikhail Piotrowski, who's director of the State Hermitage Museum in Russia. Ahlan wa sahlan. We have Mr. Michael Govan, who's CEO, and Wallace Annenberg, director of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in the US. And I'm very grateful he's with us because it's well past midnight over in LA. So thank you for being up and joining us for this conversation. We have also Sheikha Hour Al-Qasimi, President and Director of the Sharjah Art Foundation here in the UAE, joining us from her office in Sharjah, and Suraya Njayam. Dr. Suraya is the Scientific, Curatorial, and Collections Management Director at Louvre Abu Dhabi in the UAE. Together, we will discuss how museums are changing, the experiences that each visitor to a museum is hoped to have, but also the idea of how narratives are being framed through collections, through who owns the narrative of particular collections or even art pieces. The idea of collection building and collection sharing. The Louvre is perhaps the Louvre Abu Dhabi is a wonderful example of how the collections are being built in the modern era, but also how certain pieces can be shared across continents to really tell a universal story. But first, before we get into all of this, I thought it would be impossible to have this conversation without asking our panelists how COVID-19 has impacted them, how the developments of 2020 have impacted their various institutions, and how they've helped to reframe some of their thinking about the current and future prospects for their institutions. So, Dr. Njayam, if I could please turn to you first. Welcome.
Hi, Mina. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, nice to have you here virtually in Abu Dhabi. Obviously, this year was a really special year. 2 years after the opening, actually, this sanitary crisis, unprecedented sanitary crisis, has hit all the sector of the cultural sector, museums, and it had indeed a huge impact on our museum and on other institutions as well. It had an impact on an operational point of view, obviously on a curatorial one, and on the, I would say, on the digital aspects. Impact which was not as you or as some would necessarily expect, completely negative. Obviously, we missed the public, we missed the audience, But I think from the operational side, we've used this opportunity to probably draw with our colleagues, with our partners throughout the world, probably a new way of handling the operations on the ground. By nature, I would say that our display is a sort of semi-permanent display. So we had really to face as a first step those issues related to handling of collection and display, renewing the display, etc. So in this prospect, we've been able with this. With so many constraints actually and so many difficulties, I guess to once again in a way reframe the operational side and aspects of our mission and of our job. In terms also of priorities, basically priorities have been redrawn. I think, like in all the institutions, projects that were that have been started prior to the crisis obviously have been accelerated, notably the digital aspects, the collection online, and how to bring to the public in their home actually this very special narrative. From a curatorial point of view, I would say that we took the opportunity, if we can call that an opportunity, actually, to not only to rethink, but really to adjust actually our narrative, our offer for the future. So difficult, obviously, challenging, but I would say as we are a young institution still, we work in a sort of startup mode. We were able actually to face all those challenges and to do it with our partners abroad.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that, especially this idea of bringing the experience to people's homes, which really, I think, if we were talking this time last year, it would seem that it was a very niche idea, whereas now it's become quite commonplace to try to achieve that. Sheikh Hour, if I could turn to you, similarly, how 2020 has impacted your institution, but also your way of thinking about reframing the museum.
First of all, thank you, Mina, and thank you, Anais, and everybody who organized the panel. Can you hear me properly? Well, I wanted to actually, we got this question a lot from the beginning when COVID-19 started, and I think the priority was really to make sure that everybody in this institution, all the staff, everybody is kind of secure, since it was a very uncertain time. So for us, that was really a priority, to make sure that people knew that they weren't going to lose their jobs, they weren't going to be furloughed. I think for us, that was the most important thing. Some of our huge programs, like the biennial, Sharjah Biennial, which was due to open next year, we decided to postpone by 1 year. And the same with the March meeting that was supposed to take place in March, we decided to postpone it to next year, because for us it was important to give the space and time for these discussions, especially during the uncertain time of, do we go online, do we have it physically? We were very lucky enough to have opened our exhibition, some of our exhibitions in July, and the attendance was great, even with social distancing and all the security and health measures that we had to take. And at the moment we have our film festival, the 3rd edition, and the turnout has been great, socially distanced seating in our outdoor cinema. So it's been really great to see people in spaces. I was one of the people that rejected putting everything online. Our film festival is partially online for people who can't make it, but for exhibitions you can't really you can't really take it online. And I think it also sets kind of a precedent of you don't have to go somewhere, everything can come to you. And I think that's a really bad thing for us in terms of institutions and museums. We're building spaces to bring people together, to encourage people to be isolated and do everything from their home really goes against our remit. So, I'm kind of trying to hope that soon we'll be able to do more physically, but at the moment we're trying to balance and have things online for people who aren't able to make it, and socially distant exhibitions and film screenings for those who can.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Hood. I think that's really fascinating what you said about bringing people together and not that everything can come to you, and that space that's created. Mr. Govan, if I can ask you the same question, but also maybe to comment a little about what Sheikh Hood said about that creating that space where people can actually come together rather than isolated.
Certainly. Thanks for the invitation and to be here with all of you. Unfortunately, in California, the governor of the state of California has been extremely strict and put museums in a lower category of sort of importance, in fact, that retail stores are open, but not museums. So we haven't reopened since March. It's been really distressing and difficult, not just from a financial perspective to try to keep our entire staff employed, but also just from a morale perspective, because there's a sense that that museums aren't valued in that sense at that level. Now, our local officials have been very encouraging in trying to get us open soon. And we do have some public sculpture outside. In fact, next week, we've commissioned an artist to do new artwork outside, just to try to break that and create some energy. But it's, it's been a very tragic time. Obviously, I've lost friends in this time who died in COVID, but it's also been an exciting time. And in the United States, the COVID coincided also with the murder of George Floyd, which set off a whole series of protests, perhaps the largest protest in the United States history. And the Black Lives Matter movement has touched museums very deeply, because art museums like ours, that are history museums, we really are at the intersection, if you will, of a certain amount of colonialist thinking. We do embed, to use a word that is being used a lot, systemic or structural racism, as is discussed in the United States, this idea that museums have had this since the 19th century in our collections, this sort of Eurocentric point of view of the colonizers, if you will. And so the calls to rethink museums have come very strongly, very broadly, and particularly generationally, even in my own staff, among younger curators, to, I would say, not just rethink the museum, almost tear it down and rebuild it again. So it's been I think it's a very exciting time. In that sense, I think it's never been a more exciting time for art history because of this tumult that has caused reflection, rethinking. And of course, it is incredibly sad that we can't be together in person, but it has also strengthened our accessibility through digital tools. We're in the process of, at the same time, we literally tore down the largest part of our museum to build new galleries. So, which has been controversial, but 30,000 square meters of space has been torn down. And so that's symbolic, but it's also interesting. And we talked about whether we could, how would we do that even without a theater, or where we would hold events like this. And so by going online, of course, it's not as, I wish I was there with everyone, but we've also reached thousands and thousands of people we never would have reached before. Just in an incredible level. Even our educators who would have otherwise been in schools teaching hands-on, and they pride themselves on being with kids and teaching art hands-on. And so they've been making YouTube videos of how to make art at home in 7 languages, because Los Angeles is such a diverse place. And so now we have this incredible multilingual video library that is so useful for kids and families, as well as our educational symposia. So it's been a tumultuous time, but also a really exciting time. And I think, to use this idea of reframing or rethinking, it's called for. It's time. It's necessary. And so I think in this stressful time has accelerated the thinking, the actions, the reconsiderations in all these ways. So it's been tragic and exciting in the same breath.
Thank you so much for that, and for raising this point of both the intergenerational approach to some of these issues, but also accessibility, because at the end of the day, that is so important, that your amazing institutions are accessible for people, and hopefully we'll all be back to traveling and can visit in person. But until then, it's great to have that access. Thank you so much. So now I turn to Professor Petrovsky. Thank you so much for joining us from Moscow. Or no, I'm actually not sure where you are in Russia today. I shouldn't make any assumptions. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, it's St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, of course. Okay, well, it's very nice to see you. And I wanted to ask you also to comment somewhat about what this year has meant for you and your institution, but also we now move it to the wider discussion and really the framing of this conversation why we're here today, about the idea of how the museum's narrative should include the history of collections. And if we look, of course, at the Hermitage Museum and its long legacy and history, from Catherine the Great, the founder of the Hermitage, to the post-colonial discourse, which Mr. Govan just made reference to, of course, in different countries and with different histories, there's different reference point, but this generational change through collection. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. صباح الخير. مسرور جدا أن أكون معكم اليوم. It's wonderful to be with you today, and I'd like to touch COVID together with some theoretical points. And maybe can we show some of the pictures, just one after another? Please show the picture. First of all, about linguistic. I'm very happy that you now using word reframing, because it's very important to know what we are doing with the museums now, because it's reframing, it's re-envision, but it's not rethinking. Museums are museums. Museums are always based on collections, and that's no museum without collections. Disneyland, cinema, things like this. Museum is with collections, and we have to think how we make these collections speak better, how we make the context of these collections. And we have been very much thinking about it during the pandemic, because what is the role of museums in pandemic? First, bridges between museums, bridges between countries, bridges between nations, which are now falling apart. All the nations, the world is falling apart. We make the bridges. Another thing is the medicine. Museum is a medicine which helps people to overcome the whole hysteria of pandemic, and that's why they're important. That's what we always try to explain our governors and administrations. We must be open. We are safe places, and we manage to make them safe. Well, you see the Palace Square. It's divided into squares, so people somehow automatically have this social distance. Next, please. Museums today are very much organized because of, well, the new rules. And what do you see? Следующий, пожалуйста. Next picture, please. What do we see in the museum? It's a Leonardo room in Hermitage. No crowds of tourists. People looking at pictures. Nobody's shouting. Nobody's laughing. And you can, well, do it on your, well, and you can come and see and speak. Next one, please. So we have a special dress code in the museum. Somehow, well, the masks, when you call mask, say mask, it's bad way to say it. It's a dress code. It's another story. And we had dress code in the museum at the time of Nicholas I. Next picture, please. We managed to have the time, and we opened just before the COVID an exhibition about Russian icons, which, as you understand, spiritually very well fits into the thing of medicine. Next, please. We have managed to squeeze in between these two waves of COVID to show several exhibitions. We managed to change our exhibitions in Hermitage, Amsterdam. We opened an exhibition of Chinese artist Zhang Huan. Very important thing, somehow it became a manifesto of discussion or dispute between East and West. In Russia, you speak about racism in United States. Racism is all over the world, anti-China racism, just before the COVID, during the COVID. And here we make a dialogue between Hermitage through one of the most important Chinese artists. Next thing, another kind of medicine, Alexander Sokurov used Hermitage, Return of the Prodigal Son by Rembrandt, to make a video installation about the world, how he sees now. It's changed in principle the whole idea of prodigal son, which is about forgiveness. He tries to explain that there is no forgiveness in today's world. It all ends with the wars and what we have seen around in the place where the prodigal son story was developing. Next, please. Another exhibition we have done just in this month, it's just a result, and next, please. A result of some restoration of beautiful painting by Bronzino. But the painting is about Martius, you know, this satyr who thought that he's fantastic, the best musician in the world, went into competition with Apollo and was punished and killed because of his arrogance. It's a well-known story, well-known picture about today when we understand that the COVID came to us because of our arrogance, that we have to remember people must be humble and not overthink about them. So it's another story which we cannot telling. So that's how we use the collections. I'm afraid maybe after a week we will close again, but the exhibitions are there, they'll be online, and we'll use collections also to tell the story, this all good online, story of collection. You know, always when we speak about Louvre, Abu Dhabi, I'm always telling you, know, it's like Hermitage. Catherine the Great founded a museum, Universal Museum, somewhere far from all these capitals of Europe. So far, it was buying big collections. Rich Russia suddenly tried to make a museum, and well, people first have been laughing and then now laughs. This fantastic museum which established. The same thing with Louvre, Abu Dhabi. It's a whole story of developing museum, and deciding to make a museum. Decided to make a museum and doing a miracle when you have made a museum and acquisitions just in the time when everybody thought that the acquisitions are gone. Another thing, for Hermitage, the whole story of Russia could be told not through the pictures of Hermitage objects, but through the history of collecting. Collecting of Catherine the Great, collecting of Alexander I, visit of Vivant Denon, who have seen collections in Hermitage and then decided to develop the Louvre. You have revolution, things after revolution. So the whole history of the country can be interpreted through the history of collecting. So that's why we must talk about this. We mustn't be ashamed. There, in history of collections, there are always stories. Well, this is, well, people in general, people think museums are just keeping stolen goods. Okay. They're not stolen, but there is also the history. You can explain this history because you can change the history. You can explain why, what, and what, because all of today's attacks on the museum are very unfair. Museums are the most important thing to keep the memory. And we have to put this memory before the people in the way of, well, just reminding the whole history. I think with history of building Saadiyat, the Museum of Saadiyat, I have had the pleasure to be in Saadiyat just when nothing was built there. We came there. So all this miracle, it's a very important thing from all sides of points of view. It's the whole history of building. We must tell about it. We must write books. We must tell people about this. We must fight the wars of memory. Nowadays, world lives in the middle of the wars of memory. You can see it all over now. We have these things happening in the Caucasus. The war is going on in Caucasus. But museums must bring a story of collecting and collections, and the collections themselves, to stop this war of memories, to change them into dialogue of cultures, which is now, it's nice words, but they're extremely important now when the world is getting to be, well, against each other. We have to remind from the history of collecting that, remember, that it's not the first time that people are fighting monuments, destroying monuments, changing memory, and so on. We in Russia lived through this the whole 20th century, so we can give you good examples what is good and what is bad. Usually, museums must be untouchable and must be kept safe. And to be perfectly active, museums must be at the same time. And we know it well, but we must stress it. Museum is a library, museum is an archive, museum is a university. That's why it's so important that we have this meeting together with New York University, Abu Dhabi. And when we put this all together, we learn people enjoy what we are doing, and we must enjoy what we are doing We are the most important institutions for the development of mankind. I think we must we must be arrogant. We are extremely well rulers also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing those beautiful pictures and taking us on a little journey to the Hermitage. You know, you raised the point about bridges between people and also medicine to help deal, and this is one of the beautiful things about art, is to give us that spirituality and help us to deal with the immediate issues that we're all dealing with in different ways. And of course, 2020, as Mr. Govan was saying, was a difficult year for many people. And so to find that outlet of beauty is so important. So this takes us to the next part of our discussion, which is the idea of the role of museums in representing history, the beautiful coinage of changing memories, but also preserving memory. As Professor Piotrowski said, you know, how can we represent history accurately to a great degree, but also who owns the narrative for these collections that are put together and that are relevant for a certain time and a certain moment. So if I can turn to you, Dr. Njaim, please, to remark on that, and then I'll come to the other panelists.
I would start maybe by, here again by the very specificity of our display, which is once again semi-permanent. So it allows us to tell probably many stories, and the object through one trail, through one universal narrative. We work actually on finding in this transversal approach of art. We work on finding the common grounds, the common thematics throughout a spatial approach, a temporal approach, and once again a thematic approach. I think an object or an artworks don't tell only one stories, but tell many stories depending on the angle that you approach it, either the technique or the iconography. And in Louvre Abu Dhabi specifically, I think our artworks takes their meanings really with and by the dialogue with the other artworks, and this is where I think we are sort of opening a new, let's say, a new chapter in the history of the museums. I have in mind, you know, this quote from Roland Barthes, who used to say that innombrables sont les récits du monde, so numerous are the stories of the world, which in my mind resonate as an Islamic art historian, really resonates to the words of Ibn Khaldun, who says that the past resembles the future, like the water or a drop of water resembles to another drop of water. So our work in the museum is not is really to present a story, and through artwork, the artwork that speaks actually for itself, that tell a story. But I would like to react on what has been said earlier. Obviously, museums and collection and museums, definitely. However, we need also to consider the public. You were asking me at the beginning how were you impacted? Actually, the fact that when we first opened in July, and I think we were the first one in the region to reopen, collection without an audience also is something really difficult for us to handle, and we need museums need collection to be a museum, but also the collection needs the public and the audience to to find to be completed in a way. So that's the two part of the story for me.
Thank you so much. I love that idea that the collections themselves also need the audience and need the reactions and how they're formulated. Sheikh Hour, if I can turn to you and your reaction about the narrative of whether it's exhibits or collections or putting together, curating something together, and the narrative behind it. How would you react to that?
Our collection at the Sharjah Art Foundation is really based on the collections from the past biennials. So our work is actually modernist and contemporary work. And the reason for, I don't know, there was some press announcement a while ago for us to hold a museum of our collections is because, as you know, collections end up being in storage most of the time because you don't have enough exhibition space. So the idea was for us to have a building dedicated for the collection near the university city in Sharjah, so that's more accessible to the students and everybody living in that neighborhood. But these discussions at the moment that Professor Petrovsky also mentioned, about repatriation and looted goods in museums, I think are important to be discussed at the moment. I think, like Michael Govan mentioned with the George Floyd movement, a lot of voices are starting to get heard. And I think it's important to look at histories of collections and museums really from the point of view of the objects that are being exhibited or being explained in a way that isn't meant to be. A lot of these works are used as objects of ritual. They mean a lot to the communities, and they were and are looted items. And I think these discussions are really important. I don't think it's about turning against each other. There are historical collections who are addressing this, and a lot of my colleagues and friends who are speaking up against this. So yeah, but from our point of view, in terms of what we collect, it's definitely a more contemporary collection.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Govan, if I can turn to you, please, about the narratives and the discussions that you're currently clearly having about who gets to frame the narrative, but also how much do you have to, how reactive can you be, but also you have to tell, a certain history, even if it's an uncomfortable history or if it's one that people may disagree with, but it's maintaining that memory.
Yes, these are the key questions of our time. We have these artifacts and, they do tell many stories, not just one story. So there's the object, and of course there's the museum, this frame. And that question of the narrative, people want to think about museums as somehow objective, but they're not objective at all. Every museum is a narrative structured in not just what it chooses to exhibit, but how, in what order, with what context. And so this great awareness is that that's the question. The context is everything. That is a 20th century question, a 21st century question. So when we think about it's, as Soraya said, it's the public. So if we think about these collections in this museum, in Los Angeles, we have an incredibly diverse public from around the world that speaks hundreds of languages. History is for the future. We have to construct narratives that are relevant to be inclusive of this many possible futures. And history is always changing. Mikhail referred to monuments being torn down, but history is full of history changing, historical perspectives. It is not fixed. And frankly, it's been very controversial in Los Angeles that not only are we building a new building, but and I think about the Louvre Abu Dhabi, who's led the way in thinking about different kinds of structures for presentations, different kinds of labels and context in terms of what's placed around objects. This is what's happening, and it's what needs to happen. I really think so. A lot of criticism is that I've stated that not only will the museum be different in its physical form, but it's the program, the software is going to be different. We will change objects regularly. We will show objects in different narratives rather than one supposed narrative that you organize a museum by geography or by time. If you organize a big museum like ours by time, and my favorite question is, well, and someone will say, well, but only 1% of the museum is art by women, and yet the public is 50% women. And they say, well, historically, it's difficult to show things because there aren't as many objects. And my response is always, well, then change the way you organize the museum in a different order so that you can do that. Because it's really important that we are inclusive, not just of the ideas of the past, but to ask the questions about what we want to be and where we're going as a civilization. And so I think this idea of the organization of museums it's not objective. We have to take responsibility for how we think about organizing these collections all the time.
I think if I can, I think flexibility is definitely a key word for the future. We are at Louvre Abu Dhabi in this sort of constant flexibility. I was speaking earlier about the annual rotations, etc. I really think it's a movement that us in Abu Dhabi, the partners regionally, locally, the French partner also really benefits from this movement, that allows us actually to rewrite part of the story each year. It comes, listening to you, it really comes to my mind of some adjustment, and adjustment do not need to be like revolutions, actually. I was thinking of this special gallery about the trade routes, actually. We started working on the ceramic trade routes, and then on the Silk Roads, obviously. And then this year with the team, we've thought of extending actually to another network, which is the gold routes, the gold and silver trade route. So it's really a question of each objects collection, also creating the occasion of enriching this narrative. And I consider myself and the team here consider ourselves really lucky to be able to constantly readjust and work actually on thematics that we might not have thought of 2 years ago. And there is not, I would say, one truth. Actually, there are many side of the stories that we are conveying here. But as you said, the way you exhibit, the way the order where you place the objects remain something which is obviously curated by a curator. So it's what I would say, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, but for me, it's also, maybe it resonates with what Sheikh Aoud was saying at the very, very beginning. It's really the materiality of the object and the direct encounter also with the object, the emotion, the experience, the feeling, basically, which is not narrated in a way, but which is felt and transmitted actually by the aesthetical emotions that museums are here also to provide.
Thank you for that. Yes, please, Professor.
May I show some more pictures and tell about the exhibition which addressed most of the important issues which we mentioned. One of the most important issues is the exhibition I am mentioning. It's an exhibition of Iron Age, a Russian-German exhibition. Next, please. A Russian-German exhibition about Iron Age in Europe, Europe without borders. First of all, it's always issue that you don't show everything museum has, everything is in storage. If you have all this archaeology, I mean, from different museums, Russian and Germans, permanently it will kilometers, people will never see it. You can concentrate in exhibitions. Exhibition about Europe in Iron Age. It's Europe, Northern Europe, You have Greece and Persia, great empires and great civilizations, and barbarians to the north. And these barbarians, step by step, becoming Europe, Scythians, Celtic cultures, and so on. So we are showing it all together. It's a dialogue of how history was developing. It's one of the views on history. We don't have only a little bit, next please, little bit of Greece, but we have these great Scythian, gold fantastic examples of this northern development. So it's how Europe was really united in the first millennium, BC. And there is another story, next please, absolutely up to date. These things come from Russian museums, German museums, and some of the pieces come from German museums, have been confiscated, transported to Russia, to Soviet Union after the war as compensation for what Nazis has done to Russian Soviet culture. Some of the things have been returned, some of them stay here. This is how we open the exhibition. Some of them stay here. So it's a complicated issue of restitution, much more complicated than, old times. There are legal complications, political complications. It's a terrible issue. But for several years, we, with our German colleagues, decided it's okay, it will be solved one day. But our obligations as museums is to show, there must be only a show, to publish them, to study them. And for several years, we are doing exhibitions of these contested objects. We making catalogs, we are restoring objects altogether, Russian and Germans, and we give an example to all the world. You know, I always think museums are much better than the surrounding world. To the world, how you can solve problems partly, but to the benefit of humanity. One day when you opened the previous exhibition, Bronzezeit, Angela Merkel said, okay, well, these museum people teach us politicians how to solve problems or how to address problems. And certainly we're addressing another issue of opening exhibition. This is how we opened this exhibition. I'm standing alone. Hermann Partzinger, my German partner and head of the museums of Berlin, is standing, is on the screen. Only 2 cameras and nothing more, 2 curators also standing far from me. And this is a new style of making exhibitions. But we made it a big, big ceremony with a lot of speeches from different people, which will never be arranged if you have a normal exhibition where you can't speak for hours. So in a way, we try to have new ceremonies and connect them with some decisions of very important issues. We must present solutions. It's very important work for the public, but we can't allow public to dictate what we do. We can't allow it, not to the governments, not to the public. We know better. Once again, I'm very arrogant, but it's a very important issue. There are different facets of history, and we can show how complicated and how many-sided history is, and to show that it is good and not bad. It's good to have things different. It's good if you understand things different. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You know, I'm originally from Iraq, and there are many conversations happening about pieces from Iraq that are displayed all over the world. But in some ways, as Iraqis, many of us are grateful that at least people can have access that unfortunately at the moment is difficult for the National Museum of Iraq. But absolutely, I think that the importance is that role of stewardship and how you explain these stories and the complex histories and the many stories, as Mr. Govan was saying, that there are many stories. It's not one story behind each piece of art or curatorial experience. So that takes us, I think, to this point in this conversation about collection building and collection sharing. We've touched upon this. Professor Petrovsky, you were very clear in saying it's important to have a permanent collection. It's important because of the history of those collections and what it says about that particular museum. And so, and of course, Sheikh Hour, you said that these are contemporary collections of what you have and is to avoid them sitting in storage. So I want to turn to you about this idea of permanent collections, but also collection sharing, and why is that shift happening? Is it a matter of economic and financial reasons? Is it a matter of making sure that you have a wider audience for particular collections? Give us your thoughts on that.
I think for us, as I mentioned, it's not just building the building to keep it in storage, but the idea is that we collect works that mean something to the public. So in my disagreements to Professor Petrovsky, I think the public do understand and know what we're exhibiting, and it's not always about us explaining history to them, but also it's a conversation. And when we take a risk with producing a new work for a biennial or a new commission, that is our trust in the artist as well. Artists are very important in the discussion in the way we work. And when we have produced works, it was important for us that these works are also part of our collection most of the time. So it's a long history on how our collections have been building and the idea of how we get to use them. And also a lot of our histories talk about politics through contemporary voices. You know, we do look at, a lot of the artists that we work with are from the so-called global South, and our discussions between ourselves are not always having the West to write our history. There is the other side of history. We've seen it in many artists' works, you know, like Wa'el Shawqi, Cabaret Crusades, you know, it's the Arab story by Amin Ma'louf, you know. So I think it's really important for us, other voices to be heard and not always be seen as the ones spoken about. So that was one point I had to make. And another one was that the idea with collection sharing, I've had this discussion with many colleagues with museums around the world, and everybody would love to share their collection so that it's not always in storage, but unfortunately, it's very difficult. A lot of the major museums, if you're going to borrow any works from them or have their works travel, you end up having to face a lot of costs with shipping, insurance, having a registrar fly over. So I think there is a dream of collection sharing, and a lot of us do lend works to various exhibitions, but at very limited numbers because it's very difficult. Who's going to pay for the shipping and insurance? And with our institution, Sharjah Art Foundation, is a non-profit institution. We fundraise for biennials, for exhibitions. So it's very important to decide where you want to or are able to spend that money. So again, hopefully we'll be able to find a solution on collection sharing.
Thank you for that. I just want to remind our audience that you are welcome to pose your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We have, unfortunately, only about 25 minutes. So if you do have your questions, please start posing them. Mr. Govan, if I can turn to you about, well, first this idea of collection sharing and what your experience is for that, but also there's a very interesting difference of opinion, which is good and healthy, between actually we as stewards at museums who understand the complexities of these things. We have to be, our role is educational, and you know, as a newspaper editor, I agree. You know, it sometimes drives me crazy when they say, but this is what's popular, this is what people are searching for online. I say, yeah, but as an editor, I'm telling you, this is the story that counts. So I feel very strongly in favor of what Professor Petrovsky is saying, but also Sheikh Ahour is saying there is a conversation to be had. You must be receptive to what people are telling you, what your audiences are telling you, and shift accordingly. What's your take on it? Where do you sit in this discourse?
I don't think there's a conflict. I think it's, as you're saying, it's from the perspective of a newspaper. It's both. We have no, I mean, why have all of this expertise if you're not going to create, you know, provide a gift of ideas and a point of view? But I think we have, but it's usually been that point of view and nothing else. So all I think that's being asked for is a back and forth. So even in this question of who owns objects, I mean, we've been in the process. I was in Korea last year gifting back objects as we did research and understood that certain objects should be placed in their place of origin, or just recently in the case of a tribe in Alaska that's building its own cultural center. But what we found is in returning those objects, we have gained friendships that will yield objects, exchanges and loans. And so this whole idea of ownership, I mean, we don't own anything. The civilization people own these objects. We're just the caretakers, the stewards. And so this idea that we trade objects for more objects through friendships. And this, so one of the most important things, Mikhail spoke very passionately about how we've been able to construct exhibitions. It's a technology of education that has advanced so far now. But I think we need to take what we've learned from that and actually apply it, one, to our collections, because as Soraya was saying, flexibility is the key. I mean, that's all we're saying, is that if by rearranging those objects and not having them play one narrative, you can allow for those many voices, many points of view, not just from the public, but from invited points of view, non-Western points of view. So this idea of keeping things in motion, what we've learned from exhibitions is listen to your audiences, have a back and forth. And I think it's just a matter of applying that to the totality. Well, it's expensive to share collections internationally. I mean, we know it's so expensive. It's not expensive to share collections locally. So Los Angeles is 10 million people, and there are places that take an hour drive. It's very inexpensive and very effective to create collection sharing as we're doing with college and university museums, and where there are large segments of population, for example, in Los Angeles, where we know they don't have access to the museum. It's not part of everyday life. We're actually, instead of building branches in Abu Dhabi, we're going to build branches in South Los Angeles. And that kind of network is very inexpensive and very effective. And in those locales, because we're using them as Louvre is Abu Dhabi, as a laboratory for different thinking, where we are speaking with the neighborhood and the locality about how things should be talked about. It's not even just what's selected. How would anyone know what to select? But how would you like to see them spoken about? And what issues are interesting? So it's a two-way conversation. I think we're actually just applying what we've learned in our own good work and understanding what it means, the meaning of that work, to the totality of our organizations.
Yeah, definitely. Here again, I agree. This is a path that we are steadily building at Louvre Abu Dhabi. It's really the sharing also and the display of collection, artwork, etc., from our colleagues very close to us, actually. From the Emirates, from the region. So this is definitely something we're working on, and we intend to be working on even more. In term, and this I think will make the collection as a whole even more universal. Actually, we don't, as you said, we don't own the objects, we don't own the history, we just tell part of the story as we see it today, and it will change probably also, it will be enriched tomorrow. With all this in mind, actually, this is how we develop our collection, which is by essence, and I hope we'll keep that in the future, once again, semi-permanence. And if I can sum it up, we've got we use the best part of both angles, owning a collection and being able to display one of the most beautiful lawns around the world, and benefit from this sort of collection sharing. The lawns of a French museum, notably, which needs also to be underlined here, as well as the lawns locally, regionally. And so yes, I really think, once again, sorry to insist on that, but I really think we've been acting as playing the role of sort of incubators. That's what I have to say and to share. And for me, once again, the emotional and aesthetical approach is as important as the narrative itself. So For us, you know, it's the 12 chapters, and you can read actually the story. That's where the audience is really important also. You read a book and you're the only one to read it. So you can interpret, you can live with the story you've just read. You make your own story at the end of the day.
We have a number of questions, so I'm going to jump in because I want to get to as many of them as possible. Interestingly, a lot of the questions are related actually to online possibilities. We have a number of suggestions that you can share collections virtually as a way to minimize costs. But Francesca Bacci asks, what's the status of copyright costs and the charges for virtual exhibitions? Where one institution wants to loan a work of art only digitally. So there's that issue of copyright, but also costs. And to any of the speakers, I don't know if anybody's had experience in this or thoughts on this.
Actually, it's interesting. About 12 years ago, we started putting our catalogs and tens of thousands of high resolution images online for free. Because people said, well, we need to monetize this. And my view was, no, we need to share it. I mean, the whole point of this digital revolution should be, I hope, accessibility, connectivity. And so, yes, it turns out that it is more expensive and complicated than people imagine, but also its accessibility is huge. And I think, we've commissioned artworks just in the digital space. There's no reason not to work with artists who are working in that space as a gallery space. And I think to the question, that's not to give away what Soraya was just talking about, the emotion and the presence. In fact, I would say by sharing the digital space, by creating more accessibility and education, it leaves the physical museum to a higher goal, that we have to pay very specific attention to, again, how things are shown, the emotion, the light, the space, the circumstance, because general art education can be accessed now online. That's exciting. And in a way, I think that's exciting for the museum to give up a little of that general education and in the physical museum to really do what it can do extremely well, which is to be a physically immersive, emotional, people-connected space, not in COVID. But I don't think that the two are in conflict. I think that it actually creates a higher bar, a challenge to the physical museum to do what it does well, and to the virtual space to do what it does well.
But in COVID time, we would call actually the audience and we call the public to come because they can benefit. I mean, we wouldn't like COVID to last forever. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But just use this moment actually, especially regionally, especially locally, to come and visit in sort of empty spaces. Away from the crowd. But what you said, Michael, is interesting, like creating this digital space actually for commissions. And this is in Louvre Abu Dhabi. This is really, I would say, a whole area of development that the crisis actually has been accelerated, and the teams are working on definitely. Yeah.
We have a question directed to Professor Petrovsky from George Vardas. He says, you speak about museums not being dictated in terms of their collection management and what museums do. There's currently an online petition in the UK asking the British Parliament to amend the British Museums Act to allow the British Museum trustees to decide whether the deaccession of any items in their collection rather than making it statutory prohibition. So this is basically, of course, the big conversation in the UK is about the Elgin collection at the British Museum. And so the question is, Should it be that trustees make that decision and have more autonomy without government interference? I mean, you mentioned the political aspects, and there are lots of political aspects. Should more power and decision making be left to trustees?
You know, it's a very important issue because you say trustees. Trustees doesn't mean museums. Trustees is another governing body. It's like Minister of Culture. I'll tell you my personal experience. When I became director and the Hermitage was changing, I had the idea of making a board of trustees we have. Now I went first to Britain, then to America. When I went to British Museum, participated in the meeting of trustees, I said, we need trustees in Hermitage. Then I went to America. I don't know, we have many museums. I came back and said, no, we don't want trustees. They're dictating. And now also there are people dictating to trustees. You know what was happening in America when public is telling we want this trustee, not another trustee, you have this exhibition. You know, so I think the best thing is to have museums to decide. Museum to decide and not only to decide, to find solutions. Because like us with Germans, we find it's much more complicated than Elgin marbles, but we found a museum solution that everybody sees, we study things, and then the certain political solution will come. The museums must be as much possible independent from public governance and maybe trustees also. There must be limits. All together brings.
Great, thank you very much. So we have many questions, but I want to go to one question from Juan Manuel Gabaron, who asks really a question that was going to be my closing question, and seeing as we have only 12 minutes, it would be good to really get your thoughts, which is, how do you see your museum, your institution, 5 years from now? And I'll add to it is your planning, your strategic planning, changed because of the developments of COVID-19 and what this year has brought about? So really that strategic viewpoint, where can we see your institutions in 5 years' time? I'll start with you, Sheikh Khafour.
As we are working on a lot of projects, a lot of people notice that when a biennial comes, we have a new building that we've been working on renovating for the last 9-10 years, renovating a lot of old buildings. So hopefully in 5 years' time, you'll see some of those. We have the old Khorfaa Khan Cinema, the old planetarium. So we're continuing to work, hopefully, to create more spaces for social exchange, to bring people together. But we also have used COVID to really think about our digital presence. For example, with our film festival, which is happening right now, being available online, we learned a lot by trying to make all of that. How do you create an online film festival? And we've seen that happen throughout the years, this year with the various festivals. So that's been really great to be able to catch up with films that you weren't able to see in person as well. So I think to use the technology that we've learned during COVID and incorporate it to, not replace our programs that happen in person, but to enhance them, like Michael Govan said, to be able to have both platforms and be able to reach a wider audience as well.
Thank you so much. Mr. Govan, if I can turn to you next.
Well, hopefully in 5 years, we're having this conversation again in person. I would really look forward to that. In our space, it's going to be very dramatic because in 2024, we will open this new building. And the building is one thing, but to have dozens of curators who have many expertise working together to literally rethink art history. Because we have we're working with curators through COVID in virtual forums, but there are 226 small proposals that have already been made to reorganize collections in this new space. So I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to be, I hope, and I'm sure it will be interesting given the intelligence of those people involved. So it will be hopefully an experiment, but something fresh as Louvre Abu Dhabi was, to rethink art history on a grand scale. And by then we also hope to have reconsidered this idea of, instead of a singular museum in a city, a locale, breaking the museum into pieces so that our future expansion is in different communities. So again, I think one of the pleasures of the future is not that you know what's going to happen, but that you're looking forward to it because you don't exactly know how it's all going to work out. And I think that's the perspective I would take.
Great, thank you. Professor Petrovsky, 5 years from now, where do we see
I think in 5 years we'll come to Los Angeles and we have a meeting to discuss what we have done during the 5 years in the great opening of the Los Angeles County Museum, because it definitely will be a new word in the museology and museum life.
I'll look forward to that, Mito.
So, absolutely.
So we're all invited. That's good. I like this idea.
You're all invited.
We're all going to come over.
We invited ourselves, yes.
But Professor Petrovsky, can I ask you, I mean, just in terms of this, because we've had several questions about this, do you think there's going to be this new normal of that continued exchange between the digital and virtual presence and the in-person, or do you think the in-person will remain really dominating that experience, that museum experience?
You know, it's a wonderful, we are developing a proper combination, because to understand what museum has, you must be educated. You must use online education, then you come to the museum, then you understand the beauty of new lighting and all this kind of things. And when you go back, once again, you go to the site and you read about the things. This will be full scale. And it's what developing now, because before it was, well, online, something like helping a little bit in the museum, tourists just coming for an hour and a half and so on. Now we have a perfect possibility to combine these two things, combine this online education and real experiences of the museum. It's a fantastic possibility which COVID gives us, and we have to develop in a proper way.
Thank you. And Dr. Njayim, over to you. 5 years from now, where will we find Louvre Abu Dhabi?
5 years to now, I'll start with the projects that are under consideration, which are obviously the activation of the promenade, of the park, of the external spaces, the exhibitions, I mean, the usual course of business of an institution of this type. You know, personally, what I would really like to see and to incorporate in the visitor experience and in the research as well, because as Professor Petrovsky mentioned very earlier, it's a question of visitor experience, it's a question of collection, but also it's a question of research. So developing this connected history, obviously, but also and probably starting to incorporate in this sort of narrative the intangible heritage. This is at this stage of the development, and probably for us and for the team, this will be the next chapter, is really working on this intangible heritage related actually to object, to artwork, to presentation. We've been very interested by sounds, by sounds of the world, if I can say, by the many of thematics that would find their place actually in the narrative and in the general, global, universal a story of Louvre Abu Dhabi. What I would like also probably to see, and the institution as well, is really a museum in touch actually with the people, in touch with the audience, in touch with the community. We would like this place to be the house of everyone, and we really would like this place to be also a place for the artist and the artists. So for me, many areas of development related to the experience, related to the research, and related to the storytelling. But intangible thing is something that we would like really to work with, and probably we will have to associate colleagues from all over the world, because it's a big part.
So so just to follow on from that, we have a question from Shok Abdullah, who's an undergraduate visual artist from the UAE. So it's lovely to have an undergrad with us. And so she asks, are there talks of having a collective platform of various global museums, which are virtually accessible for the whole world? And she says that would be great to see come to life. I mean, do you think that's something that could be on the horizon? So it's a collaborative display between various global museums.
I think the global platforms have been, I mean, global. I don't know if it's global, but digital platform have been popping out throughout this COVID situation, and I definitely think that's something will be more and more open. But for the moment, it's open to the museum communities. So the question is, will it be open to the public? Yeah, why not? This can be considered as a box of ideas.
Great. Okay, so we are close to wrapping up. I want to thank our incredible panelists for the insights you've given us, for framing the conversation as the symposium continues today and tomorrow. Some ideas or some quotes, we heard about the gift of ideas, which truly it's what museums and your work gives to us. The back and forth conversations that continue and that history is not static, hugely important. Preserving memory, preserving history, but also creating history. We truly live in historic times. But importantly, the bridges between people, and that's what each of your institutions have given us, those bridges. I love the idea that museums are part of the medicine as we heal from this pandemic and hopefully emerge from COVID-19. Professor Petrovsky said that not only do museums provide bridges for people, but also the medicine required in the restoration of art and people. So as we go through this restoration, I want each of you to give us just a word of what you want participants, viewers who are watching, to take away from them. What's really that important message that you want them to take away with them when they think about museums and looking to the future? So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Govan.
I think this idea that the future, the past or the future is not fixed, and it's ours to make collectively. We all play a role in that, and this idea of a more active thought about what can be in the future and how we can look at history too.
Professor Petrovsky?
Well, I think that in today's world, the main mission of the museum is to convert words of memories into dialogue of cultures, and to understand that different is beautiful.
Thank you. Sheikh Ahoud.
Well, I'm gonna go a little bit different. I'm gonna say it's not always, history is not always what you're taught and what you believe it to be. There are many histories, and I think you should be very open in your thinking and questioning ideas. I think it's important to look at a global history and come into this museums or exhibition spaces with an open mind.
And Dr. Najeem.
Yeah, and for me, it's a bit my motto. It's really this desacralizing the museum. Actually, people have to come and don't be afraid. Actually, of museum as arts, as museums are unveiling part of the mystery, part of the unknown, and conveys this. This beauty which is healing to the mind, to the spirit, and that's definitely why I would love people to come as well as to experience on digital, but to come and to see and to experience by themselves.
Well, thank you very much. I hope all your doors remain open, and I hope, Mr. Govan, that your door is open soon enough, and that you are seen as essential to all of our societies. Thank you very much, and thank you to all our participants, and apologies to anybody whose question I couldn't take. Have a good day and have a good week.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone
Thank you.
around the world.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.